Welcome everyone to Cox Campus year-long journey. This is a year-long professional development experience for sessions for birth through 5 and K-3. We're going to be focusing on K-3 today. Alistair and I are on your K-3 team. Welcome, welcome.
Hey everyone.
So we're just going to introduce a little bit about us. And while y'all are logging on, sharing what states everyone's logging in from, go ahead. If you're new to Cox Campus, you can create a membership today. Takes less than a minute. It's always free. So if you haven't already done so, be sure to create that membership. We'll give you a couple seconds to do that now. You can do it on your mobile phone. Super easy. We'll be sharing resources throughout the presentation in the chat. So the membership allows you to access all the free resources. So hi everyone, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Rebecca Loera. I work at the Rollins Center as a K-3 Science of Reading professional development coach. Prior to working at Rollins, I lived in Texas. I was an elementary educator in Bryan College Station. I did go to A&M, and I moved to Georgia to work for the Rollins Center and serve the mission of literacy and justice for all. So for anyone that's from Texas, howdy, good to see you guys. And I'm gonna pass it on to Alistair.
Hey everyone, my name is Alistair Smick, and I am a content creator and instructional designer here at Rollins for Cox Campus. And prior to working for the Rollins Center, I worked as a reading specialist for students who have dyslexia and language-based reading differences. I am an Atlanta native, so I came right back home.
Awesome. All right. So like Alistair had mentioned, a lot of you guys have taken that early literacy course. If you have never heard of Cox Campus before, I want you to show Alistair a thumbs up. This year-long journey experience is your first time interacting with Cox Campus. And for those of you who are not new to us, welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Just to give a brief introduction about where it all started. So the Atlanta Speech School is a comprehensive language and literacy school with programs rooted in research-based practices, and it was founded in brain science. So in 2004, the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy was founded to share these science-based practices being implemented in the Atlanta Speech School and share it out to the greater community through in-person professional development and our free online learning platform called Cox Campus. So Cox Campus allows us to bring science-grounded approach on a more global scale so we can better go forth with our mission of literacy and justice for all. Okay, and like we said, this is our agenda for phonemic awareness, looking at assessment and how it can affect our instruction. So these are the big questions we're going to be answering in our agenda today. We're going to look at what phonemic awareness is and where does it even fit in the reading process. We're going to look at why is phonemic awareness important for reading success. And we're going to also look at what are ways that teachers can assess students' masteries of these critical skills. And we're going to look at lots of different examples of assessment can be daily assessment or also assessments that can be done in those beginning, middle of the year, end of the year assessments. So we're going to be looking at lots of different things today. We do have a lot of content we're going to cover today. And we do have a hard stop at 3:55 in order for the next webinar to begin. So as a heads up to y'all, in order to share all the many resources we have prepared for you today, we may need to move through some of the slides a little bit quickly, but always feel free to share any questions, any observations or noticings in the chat. We have our lovely moderator, McKinney, moderating that chat, and she is more helpful than anyone I know. So she's amazing, and always feel free to share in the chat anything you need. All right, Alistair, go ahead.
All right, so we're going to start by where phonemic awareness fits in the reading process. And if you all have been in the webinar series and seen that first webinar in our series, we had an introduction and overview to the science of reading. So we went through a few of the theoretical models for reading there. For today's session, we're just going to talk about one when we're looking at phonemic awareness in the reading process. So we're going to use Scarborough's rope. And if you look at Scarborough's rope, it's a model for proficient reading. And each of these strands represents sub-skills that are involved in skilled proficient reading. So when we talk about phonemic awareness, we're looking at this bottom portion of the rope, the word recognition or decoding. So it's more of our code-based skills. And phonemic awareness is going to fall under this phonological awareness strand. And in our next slide, we kind of discuss how those two work together. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but phonological awareness is kind of this umbrella term, and phonemic awareness fits under it. So phonological awareness is the ability to think about and analyze a spoken word. And there's a phonological piece or phonological sensitivity piece where we're talking about sound units that are larger than the individual sounds or phonemes. But for the purpose of today, we're talking about the phonemic awareness portion. So where we're attending to, thinking about, or intentionally manipulating those individual phonemes and spoken words or syllables. And we're going to go a little bit more in depth to explore what exactly is this phonemic awareness branch under the umbrella. And so when we talk about those individual sounds, we're talking about phonemes. So the first part of that word, phone, is the vocal sound that you hear. And the second part is eem, meaning the smallest bit. So many of you have probably heard the term grapheme before when we're talking about the smallest bit of written print. So here we're talking about that smallest sound. And readers have to explicitly learn that spoken words are comprised of these individual sounds. And it's not an automatic skill. We have to have targeted practice and instruction because we blend these phonemes together in our words and they overlap. So if you think about some phonemes that may sound similar, you may have had students that struggle with the k sound or the g sound, because when they're blended together and overlap, it can be difficult to distinguish these two from each other. Or a very common one is the digraph ch and then tr at the beginning of a word. So chip and train. When students aren't tuning into those individual sounds, it can be very difficult. And we know the more sensitive we are to the individual phonemes, the more highly developed the wiring in our brain is that connects the sounds of the words to the meaning. So basically, once a student can identify these individual sounds in a word, it's much easier to develop the phonics skills to read and write, which, as we all know, is our ultimate goal in our assessment and instruction. Oh, sorry. So we're going to, no, this is perfect. So we're going to watch a quick video that kind of explains some of what we just talked about.
After assessing a student's phonics skills, we may find...
And I am going to shift it to 27. So pardon my pause. Here we go.
Phonological awareness is the ability to detect, identify, and manipulate large and small parts of spoken language. A lack of phonological awareness, specifically phonemic awareness, is a powerful indicator that a child is in danger of failing to learn how to read. Phonemic awareness is one aspect of phonological awareness. It is the ability to detect, identify, and manipulate phonemes in a spoken word.
Bat, watch. B, bat.
A phoneme is the smallest unit of spoken language. Without the ability to attend to individual sounds, it's difficult to then match those sounds to letters and later decode words. Assessing phonological awareness helps us know which specific skills to teach. We can administer a phonological awareness survey to measure our students' ability to recognize essential skills such as blending syllables, segmenting onset rhymes, manipulating phonemes, and more.
So that overview came from our Assessing Our Students course, which is also on Cox campus. They're completely free. They're wonderful courses and resources that will explain some of this. So if you want even more information around that, you can check that out on Cox campus. So with all of that and with the background to phonological awareness and where phonemic awareness falls under it, I do want to start also by kind of explaining that the link between phonemic awareness and reading achievement. So we may be familiar with phonological awareness drills like rhyming, onset rhyme, talking about syllables, which is very important for reading instruction. But I do think it's important to note that research studies have shown the connection and correlation between phonemic awareness and reading achievement as opposed to phonological awareness. So when we're talking about instruction, particularly in kindergarten through third grade or second grade classrooms, we do want to start with phonological awareness, and it's a great primer for the phonological processor, but we want to move into the phonemic awareness piece as quickly as possible because we know the ability to perceive and manipulate those sounds is ultimately what's going to help our students become readers, and it's a strong predictor of reading ability. So then when we move into phonemic awareness assessment, on Cox campus, this is one of our resources. We have quite a few resources that we'll drop in the chat today, but it's an overview of our phonological awareness levels. So again, we're coming back to that idea that phonological awareness is the umbrella and phonemic awareness falls under that umbrella. So if you look at this graph, it outlines it really well. It moves along and each level represents, a level of phonological awareness. We're looking at this last column that is phonemic awareness. So that is the most complex skill under phonological awareness. And as they're listed out, it goes from less complex to most complex at the top. But also when discussing assessment, we need to be able to understand these different subskills that comprise phonemic awareness because we want to know where students fall. Also, a common misconception is that since they're listed in this way, that the skills only should be taught in a step progression. But in reality, we really want to zone in on these two sub-skills that have this yellow box around them, segmenting and blending, because while they're listed in the middle, they are the most crucial skills when we're thinking about transferring phonemic awareness to the reading and writing abilities. Blending is foundational to word reading, and segmenting is foundational to encoding or spelling. So each of these sub-skills plays a part in strengthening phonemic awareness, but it is important to note that we want to come back to those two skills as foundational skills when we're doing instruction. And in this slide, we're just kind of delineating how decoding leads to blending. Those skills play off each other, and to spell, you have to be able to segment a word. So blending and segmenting create the quickest and clearest pathways in the brain for reading. In the following slides, we're going to go to a few different of the sub-skills. We're not going to hit on every single one that make up phonemic awareness. So we'll highlight a few of the ones that we really want to talk about. And on Cox campus, we have an assessment, a phonological and phonemic awareness assessment. And I do want to highlight, since we had that conversation about the importance of phonemic awareness, that it is a comprehensive assessment that starts with phonological and those larger bits of language and then moves to more specific. So what we're going to be talking about today really falls under section 2 of this assessment, and then we'll touch on section 3, which is advanced phonemic awareness. And we'll drop that in the chat as well. So first up is phoneme isolation. And phoneme isolation is the ability to recognize individual sounds in a spoken word. We can isolate any phoneme in a word, but the easiest to isolate is the initial phoneme. So for example, what is the first sound you hear in the word flower? Flower. The first phoneme in flower would be f. But as we mentioned, it's not just initial sounds. So we can isolate any phoneme in the word, but this does become a much more challenging task for our early learners. So another example, if we look at that final picture, toys, if we try that one, what's the middle sound in toys? T, oi, z. So that middle sound would be oi, which is a little more complex because the student has to parse those phonemes apart, segment them apart, and isolate the phoneme in the middle. As students progress to tuning into the individual sounds, we can begin instruction beyond 3 sound words, which is obviously going to become even more complex. So they can progress to 4 or 5 sound words. So when you ask a student to isolate a phoneme in a 4 sound word with a blend, that's going to be a much harder skill. So if you ask, what is the third sound you hear in list? A student is going to have to be able to hear that specific phoneme in the blend ST, and say the third sound in the list is S. So this is a valuable window for us when we're assessing that a student who maybe doesn't hear this sound or struggles to hear this sound, we can tune in the phonemic ability to hear these separate sounds in the blends. The next skill that we're going to talk about is blending, which we highlighted at the beginning is one of the more important skills. And it's the ability to verbally blend together individual sounds to make a whole word. As we talked about, it's critical for reading and it's a key predictor for reading success. So when we're talking about blending, we start with two sound words or two phonemes together, such as e says me. And as a student gains the ability to blend these together, then we move on to three sounds such as d, I, dip, and we move to more and more phonemes. So I have a segment from our phonological and phonemic awareness assessment on this slide. And so if you're assessing it, this is just an example of what it could look like. I'm going to say a word in parts. Your job is to put the parts together and tell me the whole word. Let's do one together. At. When I put these parts together, the word is hat. Now it's your turn. So it's also critical when we're assessing these skills, we do want to present a model of what we're asking the students to do, because many of these assessments are very taxing on working memory, and we want to make sure that we're accurately assessing what the student knows. The next skill that we'll talk about is really just the opposite of blending, and it's the other one that we highlighted as being critical for reading, and that's phoneme segmentation. So that's when you're not blending the phonemes together, but the individual sound, identifying each individual sound within the word, so separating it. It involves identifying each individual phoneme, and it's foundational for spelling, because if you think about it, when a student's spelling, if the word is frog, they have to hear the word frog, and they have to be able to identify each individual phoneme, g, and then connect each of those phonemes that they hear to the correct grapheme or letter. So it's easy to see how when a student is writing, it's such a complex skill because it has that phonemic awareness at play, it has the alphabetic principle at play. And if a student is focusing on all of these things and the phonemic awareness isn't quite developed, what you'll often see, and I'm sure many of you have seen in the classroom, frog could become fog because you're not tuning into each of those individual words. So that's how spelling is really this window into phonemic awareness, and it can be used as an assessment itself. And then the final skills we're going to talk about, we're kind of addressing as a whole because we group deletion, addition, and substitution in kind of this category of phoneme manipulation. And so when we're thinking about that chart that we showed at the beginning with the levels, this is the very top. This is the most complex skill, and it's because you're identifying each of the phonemes, you're holding them in your working memory, and then you're shuffling them around. So it can be very taxing for students to complete these activities. And in assessments as well, oftentimes you'll use manipulatives or you'll use counters to kind of see a student's thought process, particularly with our early readers. We want to hold off on these tasks with students who haven't acquired the adequate blending and segmentation skills, and we want to use our assessments to tailor instruction. So these activities may be too complex for some students, and also not every single student will need instruction in phoneme manipulation the way that they need it in blending and segmenting. But the goal in K1 instruction is to be able to segment sounds in one-syllable words, and they'll develop these abilities through reading and writing, but struggling readers with phonological processing weaknesses will need these manipulation tasks to strengthen their phonemic awareness. So I know that was a really quick run through, but I'm sure many of you have familiarity with some of these sub-skills and phonemic awareness. So before we move on to talk about some other assessments, I just want to have us practice really quick. So I'm just going to give two examples of a phonemic awareness skill being assessed. And in the chat, if you can write which skill you think is being assessed, we can discuss and see if it's what we think. So the first one, the teacher is saying, we're going to break a word into individual sounds. Each box represents a sound, and we are going to use the counters to segment the word. Ready? Say rag. The student says rag. Now break the word apart using your counters to represent each sound. And the student does it and says g, rag. So in the chat, drop which sub-skill of phonemic awareness you think this might be. I see segmentation, segmenting, segmentation.
Awesome.
Segmentation. Great, that's awesome. And I will say in this one, for those of you looking extra closely, there was a little hint because it asks them, we're going to use the counters to segment the word. So this student is breaking apart the word into the individual phonemes. Great, we're gonna try one more. So in this one, the teacher is saying a s. What word am I trying to say? A s. Vase. The roses are in a vase. So this one is tricky because the teacher is saying the word in parts, but the student responded vase. So maybe me reading out loud made it a little confusing. So the student's response was vase. Yep, I see some blending. Exactly, because the teacher was giving these individual phonemes and asking the student to blend them together into one word. So we can see how when a student is reading, this is foundational to a student reading a word because they have to be able to identify each of these individual phonemes. Awesome job, guys. That was great.
All right. Thank you, Alistair, for sharing all of those super important phonemic awareness sub-skills. So now that we know the what, we need to know the how. How can we assess phonemic awareness? And so Alistair shared our Cox Campus resource of the Phonological and Phonemic Awareness Assessment. We also wanted to share with you some additional assessments that can be beneficial to your instruction. So the first one, you may have heard of this one before. This is the Phonological Awareness Skills Test, also known as the PAST, and it's by David Kilpatrick. You can share in the chat if you've heard of this or if you've even assessed with it before. Please share, I'd love to know that. So our Phonological Assessment Screening Test, it is free and it's available online. One of the reasons why it was my favorite when I was a classroom teacher. The assessments move through 4 levels of phonemic awareness skills, and those are a syllable level, onset and rhyme level, the basic phoneme, and then advanced phonemic levels. So as you can see from those 4 levels right there, the assessment starts from simpler tasks such as chunking syllables, and it moves on to more complex tasks such as focusing on advanced phoneme skills, manipulating the medial sounds, manipulating phonemes in multisyllabic words even. So this assessment is best used not just as the only assessment that you give a child, because you do want a whole-rounded view of where their skills are. It's best used as one part in a formal reading screener. And something else that makes the PAST a great resource for assessment is not only is it looking at the complexity of the phonemic awareness skills, I love that the depth at which it assesses each of the student skills. So when you look at the PAST, each level yields 2 scores. Those scores are correct and automatic. So not only are you assessing if a student got an answer right and they were accurate, you're also assessing if they had the automaticity and they were able to say the answer automatically. And I love that because it shows you at what depth of skill the student is at. So even if a student may have answered a task correctly and the skill is not considered mastered if they did not answer it automatically. One way that I would always tell myself when I was scoring a student, I would tap my foot after asking them to perform a task such as say cat. Student would say cat. Now say cat, but change the a to ah. I'd ask them that and I'd tap my foot 2 times. And if they couldn't say it within those 2 taps of my foot, that's how I knew it wasn't an automatic response. They got points for being correct if they said caught, But if they didn't say within those 2 taps, I would know that they weren't automatic, and so that we could keep on working on that automaticity to better help their fluency skills. I just want to keep a check of the time. I think I do have a little bit of time, Alistair. Show me a thumbs up if you think I do to show like minutes of the video.
Yeah.
So I did want to give you an example. If you've never seen the past before, let me check the chat.
We do have quite a few people who've given the past.
Awesome. Yay. So you guys are familiar with the past. Oh, that's okay. Yes, it measures automaticity. Oh, you've never seen it. So I do want to share for people who have never seen it before. I do recommend, don't just print it online. It is free and the instructions are free. Don't just print it online and sit down and do it. It does take a little bit of practice. So I'm just going to show 2 minutes of this student going through it.
Ben.
Want me to repeat it?
Test.
Good. Say alphabet.
Alphabet.
Say alphabet, but don't say ow.
Alphabet.
Good. Say Saturday.
Saturday.
Say Saturday, but don't say sat.
Saturday.
Say tricycle.
Tricycle.
Say tricycle, but don't say try.
Tricycle.
Good. Okay. These are going to get a little bit harder, okay? Ready? Say feet.
Feet.
Now say feet, but don't say
Eat.
good. Say love.
Love.
Now say love, but don't say ooh.
Of.
Yep, good. Say tame.
Tame.
Now say tame, but don't say t.
Aim.
Yep. Say time.
Time.
Now say time, but don't say t.
I'm.
So I just wanted to give you that quick little snippet. The assessor, I think it's this child's mother, she had assessed him, and then what she did, she went back and like re-recorded her as if she had a blank template so she could show her markings alongside his answers. And there is a specific coding you can do. That's why I said read the instructions before you sit down and do it. There is specific coding. So if he answered it correct and automatically, she marked with an X. You can see on Saturday, she said take out sat, and the student responded turday. So he did not remove that sound. So she gave him a 0 to show that he was incorrect, and she wrote what his response was. So like I said, this is on a very granular level, and it's great because you can see what skills the student needs to master. And he moved from a syllabic level down to an onset and rhyme. So as you keep going, it goes to more complex tasks. And I'm glad some of y'all know the past. I hope the ones who haven't seen it, y'all may use it. So our next assessment we're going to take a look at is the Phoneme Segmentation Fluency Assessment, also known as the PSF. So the Phoneme Segmentation Fluency specifically looks at how correctly and automatically a student can segment a spoken word. Now, the score that a student gets is the number of correct segments that they can make in 1 minute. So like I said, that's measuring the accuracy as well as the automaticity. And this is also good for progress monitoring. And just like the past, it can give you a granular look at the miscue that the student may make, so that you can analyze that data and you can look at what is it that they need to work on, where is the disconnection at. So I know one example that's going to be shared in the chat. McKinney can share the Dibbles Phoneme Segmentation Fluency. So that is a good example, another free online resource that comes with instructions on how to do it. What we're going to look at together is an example of a phoneme segmentation fluency, and y'all are going to help me data analyze it. All right, so before we do that, I'm going to explain a little bit to you guys. So when we look at this online version of the phoneme segmentation fluency, we're looking at a couple different things here. So first, this is a beginning of the year first grader, so in the fall, and I can see this is where this first grader landed with his phoneme segmentation fluency. And even though this is the score we see, I do want to emphasize it's just a piece of what we're going to be looking at. But what I do want to explain, whenever we see a red bar, that means this was a student error or student miscue, so they did not say the correct sound. Whenever we see the long green bar, that means the student did not segment the sounds. They just repeated that word back to you. But whenever we see these short green bars, that means the student was correct in segmenting the sounds of the spoken word. So I want us to take a little bit of a gander at the data we can see on here. Make sure to check the chat. A little bit of a gander. I want us to think about what miscues we see that show us a little bit of insight into the student's phonemic awareness. I'll give you a couple seconds to look at that. If anyone wants to come off mute and tell me what is something that you see, any miscues that you may see, you can point them out to me. What are we noticing? And do we notice any trends or patterns in the miscues? Don't be shy. You can come off mute. Let's see. So one thing I noticed, this for one first noticing I see right here, this long green bar, the teacher said hall and the student responded back, hall. So you may have had students do that. So my brain, my teacher brain is automatically going, did they not understand the instruction or did they have a hard time with hall? All. So my brain's already thinking, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, right? I see songs, got that correct.
I
And
see a blending issue in the final position.
Ooh, is it, remind me again, Tanya.
Tanya.
Tanya, can you tell us, where did you see, you said you saw an issue with blending in the final position. Where's that pattern you're seeing?
On count, we have out and then an error with the t, and on mind, we have an error with the vowel sound, but we also have an error with the end, the end part of the word.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya. Yeah, so she pointed out some of these errors that we saw. So she did the exact ones that I noticed too. We have an end final blend issue. Specifically, I'm seeing with both the N, the sound in the final blend. We're also noticing, like I said, this is making me think maybe it's the sound, that liquid sound. So I'm seeing maybe a liquid sound disconnection, maybe a final blend specifically with that nasal sound. Maybe the child's not hearing that when they sound it out. And then additionally to the rest of these words where they got a little bit more tough, we're seeing a disconnect. The student just omitted the sounds entirely in the final bit of words. So what this is telling me, the puzzle piece that I have is I'm noticing a disconnect with nasal blends and possibly the liquid sound. So, and this is when you as a teacher have to use your teacher knowledge. Teacher knowledge is the most effective tool for student achievement, and be thinking, how can I include nasals, final blend into my instruction and into my intervention for this student, because I see the patterns right here. Awesome, thank you so much. So that's the PSF example. Another assessment is something that you can look into daily, and that is student writing. So I know we're talking about phonemic awareness, phonemic proficiency, the spoken word. So that may beg the question, why are we talking about student writing? That's letters and that's words. I thought we're focusing on the spoken word. Well, what do we do when we're writing a word, or what does a child do when they're trying to spell a word? Maybe they're having a hard time thinking of what letters go to that word. They usually sound it out as they're writing it. So student writing gives you that window into their phonemic proficiency. And as we know, we want our children writing every single day. I once had a professor tell me reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out. So this gives us a perfect glance to see how are they matching their sounds to letters and what is their phonemic proficiency. So we are going to take a look at some examples. Let's see. And we can think about too, but some phonemic errors versus orthographic errors. So I have this example right here, And y'all know, I was a first grade teacher for a long time. I love me some student writing. So let's see. This child said, I lived in my bigger grandma's house. I don't know, it's between smaller grandma and bigger grandma. I sleep in a buck bed. So I'm gonna model this one for you, what my analytical brain is doing. I see some miscues with some spelling like live, bigger, but did that student pronounce those phonetically correct? Yeah, there's some issues with the orthographic spelling of things, but we can work on that. Let's see, but what I see is steepen and buck bed. So what this is showing me is that some of these sounds are omitted. Sleep, sleeping, instead the student wrote seep, and also a bunk bed, the student wrote buck. And so in both of these words, they omitted that consonant blend. So that is a pattern that I see and a trend that I notice. And that's giving me insight. Okay, this student is struggling in the blending sound in both the initial part of the word and the final part of the word. So we may need to work on our consonant blends. And this is a first grader spelling. So like I said, even though they had incorrect spelling over here in live and bigger, it's pretty good for a first grader. And it was incorrect spelling, but reasonable graphings were used to spell the word. This is giving me insight to their phonemic proficiency because they represented the sound incorrectly. So that's something we can work on. So now it's your turn. I want you to take a look at this writing. Y'all, student writing gets me, I tell y'all. I like Mrs. Edwards. She is my teacher. I like when she does meth with us. And obviously we can see, we know what the student was talking about when they talked about that. So I want someone, I kind of gave the answer away. I got too trigger happy with my mouse over here. I want someone to tell me what are things that you notice about this writing. So be a data analyzer for me. What are some miscues, some strengths that we can see in this student writing? Yeah, Tonya, there's an orthographic error in teacher. I love that she specified it's an orthographic error in teacher. Anyone else? What other miscues do we see? So that teacher, I'm like, okay, that student could work on that EA says E. I know, Amy. Thank goodness for that drawing. Thank goodness that student is an artist. Yes, I saw once Annie. Thank you, Annie. We see math. We see a miscue with math, and instead the student wrote so that our teacher does math with us. Oh, I love, so I see the gears turning, Tonya, and that's what we want teachers and instructors to do, is to be wondering and asking questions. Why the sound instead of ah? And that's a great question. It could be an error in hearing. It could also be, once you get into, keep coming to year-long journey, because we're going to be addressing consonant articulation and vowel articulation. And there's a wonderful picture on Cox campus of the vowel valley. And actually it shows when you say it's very relaxed, right? Now, if you go to say those sounds are very similar in the manner and place of articulation. So that's what I'm already thinking. Well, I know that on the vowel valley, those sounds are very close together in how we pronounce them. So that's making me think, I wonder if this student is having an articulation issue with they could be tricking up those vowel sounds. So what implication do you think this has for our phonemic instruction? What is something that you think this one word tells us this student could use some instruction on? Oh yeah, thank you, Christina. Oh yeah, so Melissa, you see confusion with short E, short A. And Christina, yeah, this student's a great writer. They gave reasons and examples, so definitely they're a great writer. So let me see, was it Melissa? What is something that you do when you see students struggling with that short E, short A? What is it that you're going to be targeting in your intervention when you see that? Thank you, Rebecca. Oh, hi, nice to meet you, Rebecca. Yeah, so Melissa, those short vowels showing how a mouth looks when you say the sound. Yeah, get your mirrors out, have the kids look at what is your mouth doing when you say ah versus ah, isolating the vowel sounds. So a vowel intensive. Yeah, that's awesome. So isolate those vowel sounds. Good job, guys. Okay, and finally, we have Elkonin sound boxes. These are something that maybe many of you use or you've seen used before. If you haven't, this is such an amazing tool. Elkonin sound boxes are typically used for instruction, but it can also be used for an informal, ongoing progress monitoring. So if you haven't seen it before, Elkonin sound boxes are used to practice phoneme blending and phoneme segmenting, and it gives a student a concrete visual of the phonemes and how are they blended or segmented in a sequential order. So students place the counters in each box, and that represents a single sound for a spoken word. And many skills can be assessed and monitored when using the sound boxes, and we're going to practice one together. So let me see. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to come off mute. You can say hi, so I know you're coming off mute. Just to help me segment a sound, or I can call on someone. I'm a teacher at heart, y'all. Let me see.
I can most definitely try.
I love that spirit. LaTanya?
Let's just do it.
Welcome. All right, LaTanya.
All right, now give me the directions again for this segmenting.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'll tell you. I will explicitly and clearly tell you.
Let's do it.
All right. So, LaTanya, my sweet student, can you say the word ship for me?
Ship.
Ship. Yep. Just say all one word. Ship.
Okay, ship.
Okay, now, LaTanya, I'm going to move the chips for you on my screen, but we're going to pretend you're the student. Can you segment the sounds in ship for me?
Now I thought it was going to be, yeah, ship.
Yeah, so, oops, go back. Let me see. Don't it move for me? I had all my animations done, y'all. Okay, I'm going to escape. LaTanya did great. So,
and then
awesome. All right, LaTanya, what was the first sound you heard in that word?
I think it was the S alphabet and really the H as well. So
yeah, so the first sound in ship
like a blend.
Yes. So it's two the sound is What was the middle sound? What is the middle sound?
The I sound.
Great job. Okay, now LaTanya, I want you to say ship again.
Ship.
Now say ship, but change sh to ch. What word?
To what?
Chip.
I'm changing it to what? Chip.
So from say ship.
Ship.
Like a ship sailing in the
on.
night. Change the sh sound to say ch.
Like a chip that you're eating.
Awesome. So I would have LaTanya as a student. She would take off that sh sound and she would put in the ch sound. What word did you make, LaTanya?
I made chip.
Good. So as you can see, there's lots of skills we can do. I started asking her questions. What was that first sound? What was that middle sound? And then having her isolate those phonemes, having her manipulate by changing it. I probably use this skill if my student was learning or focusing on digraphs, and maybe we're reviewing the difference between the sh sound and the ch sound, which often was took a little bit of practice for my first graders to get those two differentiated. So with the ongoing questions that I had for her, I was seeing, could she explain what she did to me? And so that is a way of an informal, ongoing progress monitoring that you can use the Elkonin sound boxes for, as well as using them for instruction. They're really a great tool. Okay, Alistair, go over our agenda.
All right, so we had a full session today. We had lots of resources, lots of information. So make sure, if you have not already, to sign up with Cox Campus, because the assessments, the resources, the overviews, that Val Valley, all of these resources are available and they're free. So let's review the goals that we had in the beginning of the session and see if we touched on all of them. What is phonemic awareness and where does it fit in the reading process? Why is phonemic awareness important for reading success? And how can teachers assess students' mastery of these critical skills? And I think we covered all of these in our session today. So if you have an insight or one thing that you've reflected on or one takeaway from this presentation and wouldn't mind writing it in the chat, if you would just drop it in the chat.
Or if you have another question.
Or, yep, any questions.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're doing that, we're also going to go ahead and post a poll. Before we wrap up, we'd love to hear your responses on this poll. It's going to just ask a few questions about our session today. And we will have this webinar posted for you to be able to watch again.
I see a question about assessment. So upon completing assessment, does it provide action items and resources?
I know I can speak for the past. I know we're looking at different ones, and then Alistair, you can speak on. Do you want a specific assessment for us to answer on, Christina, or just on any of the ones we spoke about? Any of them? Okay, I'll let Alistair, you can speak on Cox Campus and I can speak on the next few.
So the Cox Campus one, it'll go through and you'll get the feedback from the assessment, and it'll basically just point you to just any assessment, the areas that you need to focus on. If you go to that early literacy course on Cox Campus, it really digs into each of those sub-skills and provides an explanation and shows examples of teachers doing those teaching those sub-skills in the classroom. So it is an invaluable resource. So then when you got your scoring from the assessment, those would be immediate takeaways for how to implement in the classroom.
And I can speak for the past, Christina. It is David Kilpatrick's work. You have the past assessment. He also has David Kilpatrick's 1-minute drills. And when you get your scoring done on the past, it kind of shows you what instructional level that student is working on with their phonemic proficiency. So if you look at the 1-minute drills, you can use that level, like the level E2, which is what typically I think a mid-kindergartner may be at, is level E2. And you can go to those 1-minute drills, page E2, and it has all these drills to help strengthen where they're at. The PSF and the other one, student writing Elkonin sound boxes are more of the informal, looking at anecdotal. The PSF, I think, shows you more of like what words they are having disconnections with, and so that's what you can kind of focus your instruction on. It gives you more of a plan of action. So if they struggled with, like, that student final nasal blends, okay, like I know what words, what skill level I need to focus on for this student is final nasal blends.
This is not a question, but I think it's a good comment just to lift up from Tanya, I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Tanya.
But about paying attention to specific errors students are making with their encoding, because it gives insight into possible errors in decoding.
I agree with that, Tanya. I had a very close professor of mine, I'm still close to this day, say never give a test or a writing that you don't plan on using. Don't just give it to give it. Don't just give it for a grade. Like, how are you going to use it to inform your instruction? So I hope that we helped you with ways y'all can do that today.
I have another question about clarifying where do we get the past and PSF. Those links were dropped earlier in the chat.
I know they might need to be, I'm not sure. I know someone asked like if some of the beginning links can be shared. But if you scroll up, let me see.
And then also too, just want to share that the replay will be available. So you'll know exactly which links to look at. So that's just something to share as well too.
Yes. Thank you, Barbara. Yes, the past is available online. If you Google past assessment, his website pops up and it's all there for download. Does the replay have the links? Shante?
The replay will not have the links. It's going to be a YouTube link. And so from there, you'll be able to see which assessments were covered. However, I will drop the link of the YouTube replay channel area so everyone will have access to it.
Okay. I will.
Thank you everyone so much for coming to this session. It was so much fun and I feel like it was a really productive session. Please come back for our next session, which will be October 27th. And we'll talk about how Rebecca hit on earlier, the consonant classification, articulation, and instruction. So breaking phonemic awareness down even more to kind of the next level. And you can find us on any of our social media. We'd love for you to reach out. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us on any of our social media sites.
Thank y'all for participating. Hope to see y'all again. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.